morning or good afternoon, depending on when this is going to be shown. And first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at this forum. I'm really honored and pleased to talk to you. My argument today is simple, and it covers a topic about which I have written most of my life, and that is media pluralism. And the argument is that the tools we build to protect media pluralism still work, but I think they now describe only a shrinking part of how people come to know things, how people get themselves informed. So my view is that unless we extend them, we will soon be regulating an information environment that we can no longer see or even understand. So let me start by picturing an ordinary citizen who wants to know, for example, what their government decided yesterday. 10 years ago, that question traveled through an identifiable institution, a newspaper, a broadcaster that had a known owner, a known editorial line, and very often legal responsibility for what it published. But today, in 2026, that same citizen increasingly may ask an AI assistant or a search engine that answers rather than links. The answer arrives, as we all know now, using these systems, as a fluent summary. It may cite sources, but it may not. The citizens are still informed, but through a chain of decisions they cannot see, and that most regulators and media policymakers cannot reconstruct. So here is the core of it. For 4 decades, media pluralism research has asked 4 questions. Who owns the outlet? Who funds it? How large is its audience? And whether it is editorially independent. Those questions, of course, remain necessary. Ownership still matters, capture still matters, but I think what is happening now is not one more incremental shift. It is a reorganization of the public sphere that, in my view, is as profound as the arrival of broadcasting or the arrival of platforms. Because for the first time, the systems that mediate public knowledge do not merely distribute journalism, but they generate an answer in its place. And I think a change of that magnitude cannot be governed with instruments that were built for an earlier order. The decisive editorial choices now happen not in the newsrooms, but inside infrastructure, in companies that deal with training data, alignment, interface defaults, and none of that is captured by ownership data. And that is the gap. So this is not speculation. I'm not going to insist much on this, but we already have a number of studies showing a huge change in how people get themselves informed. There is a major fall in, for example, in search referral traffic that is affecting how media outlets are operating and how people, collect information. And this has a lot of repercussions. But what we really see here is that the old bargain, which was search indexes your work and sends readers back to you, is rapidly breaking. So we need to regulate that. We need to understand this new information reality, but before doing that, we need to name it. Drawing on a year-long study by the Media and Journalism Research Center, which I manage, grounded in relevant legal analysis and interviews with regulators, I attempted to offer 2 terms. The first is the automated information order. This is essentially the world we live in, the whole arrangement of systems that now mediate, generate, rank, and monetize public knowledge. And the second is the automated information infrastructure, and this term is meant to describe the measurable layer beneath it, which for the moment has 5 parts. I'm sure there will be more research and more experts working on that, and will expand and improve that. And these 5 parts, these 5 new realities of the information system that we need to map are the training data. We need to understand who and how data is trained, models, those companies and people building models, the companies controlling computing power, the interfaces, and alignment operators. In fact, 3 of those, the training data, the interfaces, and the alignment, directly shape what citizens see. And we already see the trends and new tendencies in the media sector triggered by the rise of the AI. And one of them, of course, we can spend a lot of time here, but one of them that deserves singling out is the AI content licensing market. Since 2023, large publishers have signed deals with AI companies, and this is not a problem in the sense that publishers are paid. In fact, I'm very happy for them to be paid, but the problem is that inclusion in automated answers is now negotiated through private confidential contracts outside the public policy area. And the second problem that we already started to see is that brand name publishers get licensed, cited, and remunerated. But on the other hand, local, minority language, and small independent outlets sit outside that paid core. And this is a new form of control, in some ways, I believe, more dangerous than the capture we know how to name. Because old-style capture was visible, a proprietor bought a paper, a license was pulled, but the new control is invisible. No editor is ordered to suppress a story, but simply a source is simply never retrieved. So what we are seeing here is power moving from owners you can identify to infrastructure you cannot. So what do? I think it's very important to really understand and map these new realities to have improved media regulation and media policy. And I think we have to start by not throwing out what works, but extend it. And this is the heart of it. Keep everything that we already have and add what we are missing. So I think we still need to keep the classical data set. We still need to understand ownership, funding, audience, editorial independence of media companies. But we need to add alongside it an infrastructure data set organized by what is realistically observable. And here in my paper, I offer this three-tier system of data that needs to be collected to really make sense of the new realities. And we have to act on that very fast. And in some parts of the world, we have the tools. In fact, in Europe, we have 4 instruments that are already in place and that can help us, policymakers make sense of this new reality. We have the European Media Freedom Act that asks regulators to assess online concentration, and we have the Digital Services Act that opens data to researchers, and the Digital Markets Act that tackles gatekeeping. And on top of that, there is the AI Act requiring summaries of training content. Connected, these are the strongest starting points for the future pluralism policy. What is missing is not, hence, a new law, but is the will to join them up. However, Europe is the easy case, where there is no such scaffolding, and this is in much of the rest of the world. The most useful mapping needs no regulator at all. I think universities and civil society organizations have to start doing that work. We need to start understanding, for example, which AI systems do people use for news? Do they cite local outlets? Who is licensed and who is blocked? I think we need surveys, query audits, publisher questionnaire. I think universities and civil society coalitions can do that and should start really doing this work to better understand the new world and information system we live in. So that being said, let me close with 2 versions, I don't know, of 2035. You can choose any year here. What is it going to happen if we take the unregulated path, and what is going to happen if we start now building on that future-looking media policy? On the unregulated path, a citizen in whatever city in 5 or 10 years will ask their assistant what the government decided, and the answer is fluent and confident. It silently omits, avoids the local outlet that broke the story, because that outlet may not be in the retrieval network. So what we are going to face is that nothing illegal happened. No editor was silenced, yet the environment has quietly narrowed and no regulator can even describe it. And that's a major problem for media pluralism. But if we take the properly regulated path, I think what we are going to have is the same answer sitting inside an environment made legible. Local journalism will appear because inclusion is monitored, dependencies will be known, and nobody will have to inspect whether every model, the data, simply had to exist in capable hands. With that, I think I want to conclude by saying that both paths start here in 2026. And almost none of those choices are yet foreclosed. What we need is not new in kind. I think we need to keep ownership, funding, independence, and reach, and add infrastructure mapping before the market structures that we have already today harden into something we can no longer challenge. On that note, thank you very much, and I hope you will have a great discussion.